something I wanted to talk about today was compare how we all found our ways into machine shops.
I swept the floor, sawed material. I didn't know anything about machining when I started. We built a house, and then they auctioned it off at the end of the year.
The question is, do you want to buy a house built by high school seniors?
I went into it just because I didn't know what I wanted to do.
Considering how many people don't even know what machining is, I guess that increases the likelihood of it being random.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Impractical Machinists podcast. As always, my name is Patrick, and I'm joined by Cameron and Brad. How's it going, guys?
Good. How about you?
Doing good.
Cam?
Yep, we're good. We are mostly recovered from all of our recent breakdowns, I guess.
Air compressors up and running?
We have one up and running, one of two. Well, one of three, because one of them's brand new and hasn't been hooked up yet.
Have you found a new source for a welder?
No. Our welder, like the guy who welds for us, is actually really good.
Mm-hmm.
It was just a bad circumstance. But we did have two broken down TIG weld machines, and we got one of those back up and running. And then I actually thought our rental forklift died today, but for some reason, one of the guys, when they used it, they turned the propane off after they used it. I just changed the propane like a few days ago, and so I was like, there's no way it's out. I just put it on there.
Right.
And it was like, I cranked it up and ran for I'd just been using it too. So I drove it around for probably 5 minutes with it closed. It made it for a while. Shut it off. And then I got right back on it, cranked it back up, ran for about 2 seconds and died. And I was like, oh my God, you gotta be kidding me. I'd crank it up again, run for like 2 seconds and die. And I'm like, here we go.
You don't shut the propane off?
No, we leave
every
it
day.
on. No, we leave it on all the time. And so
I think off, you probably hop off of it.
Yeah, no. Ours gets used every day, like multiple times a day.
Leak though, so.
Oh, so yeah. This one's a pretty. Well, I don't know how new it is actually, but it's like a Toyota forklift, and it seems to be in pretty good shape. So it doesn't look old. I don't think it's got any leaks. I don't smell any propane around it, but I know our Heister, that one doesn't leak either. So we just leave it on all the time. But
yeah, both of ours are always left on, but it seems like I have to use a forklift maybe once a month. But it seems like every time I do, about halfway between shops or as far away from the tanks as possible, the darn thing runs out every time.
Yep. It's like when you run out of gas on a lawnmower.
Mm-hmm.
You forget to check it and you always run out when you're far away.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I thought we had another forklift issue today, but one of the guys, he's been a machinist for like 40 years, so he's worked in a lot of their shops. So I think that's just a habit from working in other shops, which is probably a good habit to have. So I wasn't expecting the propane to be off, but that was obviously an easy fix. Turned that back on. We were in business. Good. But we're mostly recovered. It was just a string of bad luck, I guess.
Yeah, you guys have had a rough time here lately, that's for sure.
Yeah. Just honestly, to me, it just seems like a normal machine shop life.
Yeah, it never goes perfectly. Nothing ever goes perfectly.
No. You always forget to order a tool.
Mm-hmm.
You always realize that when it's too late that, the wrong material got ordered or got cut wrong.
Does that ever happen with you, Brad?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
But I got places I can drive to pick stuff up or send a courier.
Yeah. We need to start looking into using a courier. Right now, the owner's mother-in-law will actually deliver stuff for us. She'll drive her flatbed and deliver stuff for us, which is pretty cool. So she's our courier, but like an actual courier service may be something worth looking into.
Yeah, I think most of the time if I send one to pick up tools, or I think the furthest place I send it, it's like $40 or something.
Oh, so
it's not bad.
So you know how we were talking about, me and you, Pat, not having anybody near us for tooling and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So our Kennametal rep stopped by the shop yesterday, and I was talking about how the company we get Kennametal stuff through right now, like their pricing isn't all that great. Sometimes it's decent, but other times it's like the same price as MSC or higher than MSC. Mm-hmm. And he's like, yeah, that definitely shouldn't be happening. I was like, well, who do you know that's better that we should be using? And he threw a couple out there. He's like, actually, these guys are like 30 minutes from you. They're down in Jasper, which is where, like 20 or I don't know 20 miles south of us. So
Mm-hmm.
and it's all highway. So if we really needed something, I guess it depends on if they have an actual warehouse down there. If we really needed something, we might be able to have somebody local now.
Mm-hmm.
But he's going to come up to the shop next week and meet us, and we're going to get hooked up. So
that'd be good, man.
Yeah, we'll see where it goes.
Like in our case, I'm trying to think how far away Knoxville is. That's the nearest like big city. It would probably be a suburb of Minneapolis, but for around here, it's I think the third largest city in Tennessee. But there's a few distributors up there, but so many distributors around here, they rarely warehouse anything. So much stuff is just they buy it and exactly they ship it from. Like most stuff I see, on the shipping label, it's not from XYZ distributor company, it's from the manufacturer. So
that's what I'm wondering about this guy in Jasper, or this company in Jasper, if they actually stock stuff there. If they do, hell, I'll stop on my way home and grab stuff and save us the shipping.
Right. How far are you from Atlanta? Because MSC's got a huge warehouse in Atlanta. I think.
So MSC and McMaster, we can pretty much always get next day.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an hour and 20 minutes from the shop, hour from the shop.
I got you.
And we have a highway that runs straight north to south from Atlanta all the way up through Blue Ridge. So, which Blue Ridge is north of us. We're in LJ, which is obviously south of Blue Ridge, but you just keep going south and you're in Atlanta. So, something I wanted to talk about today was compare how we all found our ways into machine shops. I think we all took a different route. Yeah. Seems like there's a million different routes you could take to actually get into a machine shop. Well, I mean, starting with somebody who wants to get started, I guess if you wanted to give them some advice, in my opinion, I think just about any machine shop out there needs help. They need more workers. So you could probably just walk up to any machine shop.
Yeah.
And be like, hey, machining seems pretty cool. I might want to do that. Can I work here? Like, yeah, you can come sweep the floor and saw material.
That's kind of how I got started. I mean, I swept the floor.
Yeah.
Saw material. I didn't know anything about machining when I started. So
yeah. I actually skipped that step. I didn't go to school. I didn't go to school for it, but the shop I started at, they had a dedicated saw guy. Nobody swept anything, so sweeping the floor didn't really happen. They pretty much just stuck me on like an old Sharp mill that was probably going to be okay if I crashed it, and had me just learn on that.
That's a good way to start. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that.
I was gonna say, you went to school for it. How was that? I guess let's start there, because that's probably the most. I mean, anyone that wants to get into it, that doesn't know anything, doesn't want to walk into a shop, that would be a starting point.
Yeah.
So I guess I probably had the closest to the traditional apprenticeship that you'll mostly find nowadays. I went through a state-run tech school. Tennessee's got a pretty decent program for technical. They're actually called colleges now. I think there's 27 of them in the state. I went into it just because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and that was the closest thing that between myself and my dad and his past experiences with people that were machinists that kind of led me into that. And I'm glad I did, because school really, it got me acquainted enough with machining and the theory of machining where I had a very firm grasp of the basics going into it. So, I understood a little bit about feet and speeds and a little bit about what cutting tools you use for different operations. Gave me a very minor background in, operating a CNC machine, manual machine, even a little bit of basic CAM programming. Now, that was 20 months that took. I could have probably done it in a year. The program here is 20 months long, but if a person is motivated, they can probably do it in a year. And I'm not going to say that the schooling is the best. It could be a lot better funded, a lot better, just better in general, better instructors, so on and so forth. But I'm glad that I went about it the way I did. But I have met a lot of people over the years that went through like how you two did, and they're just fine. I look at it like this: having that paper that, okay, you graduated and you've got this diploma with a whatever title, it might get you in the door in a better spot somewhere. But after that, once you work there a year or two, it really don't matter. The
Did you have to
experience.
show the diploma to the company you work?
I put it on my resume. They never wanted to see it. Of
They
course,
never checked it.
right. And to be fair, where I work is, even to this day, they're pretty involved with the tech school. So, I mean, the owner was coming down there and meeting students. He met me a year before I came to work here. So that's one thing I'll say. They're pretty involved with it. And that's something that I really wish more companies would get involved with. That would help a lot if, they could help provide more donations, more funding, whatever, to local tech schools. Because, I mean, their budgets are garbage. It might be different in other states, but I mean, Tennessee, it's not great. At least at the one in Athens. So, but like I said, once you work somewhere for a couple of years, a lot of times you kind of have to do some unlearning too. Like, you've learned to work with a bunch of garbage, dull, burned up high-speed steel end mills and cheap garbage drills and stuff like that. You kind of have to like change how you think about it when you get into a spot where, oh man, I've actually got some indexable turning tools and indexable parting tools and carbide end mills. It's amazing. It's amazing. But the basics are still there. So
when you went to school, did you start on manual equipment or?
I did. So I started with a manual lathe, just because for some reason in my head, just a little minuscule amount that I knew about a lathe or a mill, I figured the lathe was the easier place to start. So,
go ahead and start with the most dangerous.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's what I didn't know. Yeah, the phrase "you don't know what you don't know" is very appropriate there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I started with manual lathes. We didn't go through like years ago. I mean, and I think the way that program was years ago, you would start with a drill press and a file and a saw, right? You would do the typical apprentice thing of file a square block out of steel and make drill jigs and stuff like that, drill gauges, all that junk. And we didn't do any of that. I mean, we just jumped straight into, here's a piece of material, walk you through the controls. Here's what not to do. Just chew up some metal, and get used to how metal acts under a cutting load. So, and the way that program is, there's a certain amount of projects that you go through, and you're just given a print, and usually you just dig around and find appropriate material, make the part to print or as close as you can. When I was there, it's different now, but when I was there, typically people would work through all the lathe parts, which is like maybe 7 or 8, and then they'd get the opportunity to go to a Bridgeport, and they'd work through the 7 or 8 Bridgeport projects. And then that would culminate in like 5 or 6 what they called combo projects, where you turn apart and then do some millwork to it. For most students, I mean, that was like it's split up into trimesters, so a 4-month period, right? Usually, just because of the pacing, and you got book work and stuff in there too, and other not machining garbage that you got to do. That's usually like 6 months right there. It shouldn't be, but there's another thing, and I don't mean to harp on the school system because it gave me the opportunity that I had, but they really overload the instructors, I think. That's another issue. You've got 20 people, 20, anywhere from, retirees to people fresh out of high school that still got mashed potatoes between their ears. And, you know, you're trying to keep a bunch of kids from getting killed, right?
Yeah.
Because that wouldn't go over well if all of a sudden,
I couldn't imagine keeping up with 20 people who didn't know what they were doing.
Exactly.
I have a hard enough time keeping up with like one or two.
Yeah, I know it. And it's
And
hard.
some of these kids coming into school have never seen a machine before.
Exactly. Because
some of the kids coming in our shop have never seen it.
Yeah.
Right. Very few high schools around here even have shop classes. I mean, and if they do, they're, very destitute.
That's one thing that kind of aggravates me about, well, I guess public school in general. When I went to high school, there was 0 skilled trade classes at all. Didn't have anything. The closest thing you could get was like, I don't know, basically your job was to build props for the theater department. So you'd like cut stuff out of plywood for like, you know, like a tree out of plywood or something for a play. That was the closest you could get. Other than that, it was all, you know, electives that were geared towards college, of course.
Yeah.
So we didn't have auto, we didn't have agriculture, we didn't have welding, obviously no machining.
Wow.
No, yeah, none of that.
See,
And a lot of schools are like that.
Yeah, I was going to say
we had a building trades class. We built a house, and then they auctioned it off at the end of the year.
What?
We didn't have any. I think in middle school we had a shop class. We built a little grill. I still have mine.
Of course you do.
You form it, the shape of it. They had a tack welder. You had to build the grate handle. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I think
Cool,
the first
man.
shop one, we did a little garden shovel or whatever. I still have that too.
Yeah. Dude, that blows my mind though that y'all built a house. Like high schoolers built a house and auctioned it off.
Yep,
That's a good idea because I'm sure they can make a profit. Your labor was free.
Yep. So we did it all year. You had to be a senior, and I don't remember if it was all day or if it was half the day. We'd go outside and build it for the year, and then they had an auction every year. They don't do it anymore. I think our class, maybe the year after us, was the last one they did.
Now, the question is, do you want to buy a house built by high school seniors?
Good question.
Probably not.
Right.
We roofed it too.
Really?
Wow. See, the thing, I bet what killed it for one, and the same thing that's killing a lot of like just shop classes is liability. Because, little Jimmy gets a chuck key through his head. I mean, somebody's getting sued. That's just the way this nation is nowadays. I hate to say it.
People get sue happier. Somebody's got to burn for it, you know.
Right.
All the parents want somebody burned at the stake, it seems like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of factors to it, man. But it's just, even around here, like the county that I actually grew up in, the high school, I think it had a wood shop class, but it didn't have any kind, and maybe a welding, but no machining. And then the something kind of funny about Athens, Tennessee, which is where the closest tech school is, it is right next door to the high school, which for one makes traffic a nightmare. But it's got a okay shop class, but like it's not what it should be. So much of it's just motivation for the teachers. There is none, right?
Yeah.
Budgets are poor, so on and so forth. I could go on and on because that's a big pet peeve of mine. People like to say we need more manufacturing in the United States, in the world, but I don't know. It's just odd. I do know that the tech school has gotten in better shape as of the last few years. They had a better instructor. Unfortunately, he just passed away recently, and I don't know who they replaced him with. But when I was there, they had a Haas VF1 and a TL1. That's it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Back at school, you did a trimester of manual equipment, lathe, Bridgeport. At what point do you go into CNCs, and what type of CNCs?
So when I was there, which it's not this way now, I think I started dabbling with the CNCs and Mastercam in my third trimester. So that's after being there 8 months. And my instructor was a great guy, but his career was like more of a maintenance machinist, mostly manual. So like the CNC schooling that I got was not very, matter of fact, I learned more from one particular student than I did from the instructor, just because he was super bright and, he picked up on it real well. So that's what made things a little tricky. But I started dabbling with Mastercam a little bit. We had, I think, Mastercam X6, something like that. And at that time, there was actually only 2 projects, a CNC mill project and a CNC lathe project. That's all you had to do to finish that part of it. Now, most everybody would go through and make stuff for themselves, which I certainly did. I made all kinds of, crap for myself with the CNCs, manuals, whatever. But now the way that it is you actually remake all of your manual projects on the Haas's, which is great. I think it's a great thing, because otherwise, there was people, matter of fact, a guy that I work with, he started a trimester before me, and he graduated like a month into my second trimester. That's mainly because, the purpose of the school is to get people into jobs, right? So that means if a job opening comes up and a student is remotely qualified and they want to take it, of course, they're out. They go get the job, and, the diploma kind of becomes like a formality at that point, really. The goal is get somebody in a job, hope they retain it, and that's that. So the focus is really not so much like apprenticeships from 30 years ago. The focus was putting out a qualified journeyman machinist by the time you were done, right? Was that still a thing? I'm not poking fun at your age, Brad, but
I knew that was coming.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but back in the faraway days of the 90s or 2000s, whenever it was,
the late 20th century.
Yeah, the late 1900s.
2004.
Okay,
20 years. It's been 20 years now.
That's right. So
no, that wasn't a thing. When I got into it in 2004, I recall seeing occasionally job postings that did say journeyman or machinist 1, 2, or 3, but they never really. I think it was just something they threw on job listings, because I applied at a couple and they never asked that question. And I think I worked with maybe 1 or 2 people that actually had a journeyman's card.
Mm-hmm. Do y'all know of any shops that actually have an apprenticeship program?
Actually, I do. Around here, it seems like it's mainly a tool and die thing. That was actually a couple of and I don't know what makes tool and die so, special in that regard, but like, there were 2 places when I was in school that were like the place to try to get a job at, because, tool and die apprenticeship paid well. You got to learn more, and it paid a lot better than just an entry level, go push buttons on a CNC or, whatever, run a saw, whatever.
So what made it an apprenticeship, a true apprenticeship? Because I started in a tool and die shop, and I didn't do an apprenticeship. I just kind of did on the job training. Mm-hmm. What do you get at the end of the apprenticeship?
Well, truth be told, Brad,
a raise?
Right. That's kind of what I figure. I don't, around here especially, I'm saying this completely in ignorance, but I feel like it's more of a northern thing, because a lot of people that I've met from Ohio, Indiana, Minnesota, so on and so forth, they talk more about like an actual formal, you go through and you learn and you're schooled and you do actual jobs and you're graded and all this other junk, and you end up with a card, something that I don't know what the governing body is, but whereas around here,
I suppose it's probably similar to other trades that do apprenticeships, and you have to work so many hours in a period of time, and then you go wherever controls it take a test. So I suppose back in the day for machining, that was probably something they did.
Yeah.
You did your apprenticeship, and then you got your card, machinist 1, 2, 3, journeyman, whatever.
You
But
think,
it seems like that kind of fell off in machining.
yeah. Do you think so? Like Patrick, you were saying you noticed it was still more so up north than it is down south. Unions are also more so up north than they are down south. I wonder how much that plays into it. Because I mean, I don't really know much about unions, but it seems like, there's different levels to it whenever you're unionized, and maybe having that apprenticeship in like machinist 1, 2, 3, journeyman, all that stuff places you or your capabilities somewhere in that union.
Yeah. We don't have any machinists in Minnesota. I know there's a couple shops that are in a union, but they're not machinist unions. They're just a local whatever.
Yeah.
I don't
maybe that's a guest we should have on, is someone that
somebody that
in a
actually knows.
union, or not an older machinist, older than me, Pat.
Oh man,
somebody that was machining in the 80s and 90s.
You think you'll be able to work the technology to be on the podcast? I know a guy. I've talked about him before. I'd like to have on, but he has a funny story about unions, and I don't want to get into it because that's a touchy subject. But it's funny, and it paints a picture that's not good. And that's the thing about it. Most people I've ever talked to around here don't like. I mean, it sounds great, but in practice, it just seems to breed, people being lazy and stuff like that. But that's one side of the story. You never know both.
Yeah.
I do think, Cameron, that's a very good point about that, though, because I don't believe there is a machinist union. It's kind of lumped into other unions, but that's almost like a governing body in a way. So if you have a apprenticeship or a journeyman card that's recognized by a union, then any company that is a part of that union, they would recognize the legitimacy of that card and of your whatever. But if you just if I go to Lazy Boy, there's a Lazy Boy factory not far from here. And they were one of the ones that had a tool and die apprenticeship. Well, if they're not part of a union, sure, you can be a tool and die guy that went through their program. That don't mean nothing to anybody but Lazy Boy.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a good point. That might have a little something to do with it.
I don't know. I don't really know anything about unions, so.
Have you guys ever heard of NIMS? NIMS?
Actually, I think I just heard about that the other day. I was talking to one of my tooling suppliers, and he said something about that.
That's interesting. Brad, have you heard of it?
I have not. Is that the one that does the... No, I don't think it's NIMS. No, I don't think it's what I heard of.
Do you remember what it stands for?
I was just trying to think of that. It's I think National Institute of Machining or Manufacturing.
I think it's manufacturing
standards or something like that. And that was right when I was leaving tech school, which would have been 2014.
National Institute of Metalworking Skills.
Okay, there we go. I was half right.
Yeah.
I missed the important part.
Close.
That was supposed to be a sort of a governing body of if you went through a NIMS certified program, you were somebody, right? That was going to be a thing that mattered to a lot of companies. And I believe a few years after I graduated the tech school here, it went into a NIMS program. But I don't think anybody cares. I don't think it caught on anywhere. So there's really nothing you could go to school in Tennessee or Georgia or, Washington or Minnesota or wherever and probably get a completely different standard. Well, heck, I know, one quick little side tangent. I mentioned funding for schools earlier. One thing that got me, the tech school I went to, I mean, I wasn't kidding when I said our tooling was burned up high-speed end mills, junk drills, and hand-ground high-speed steel lathe tools. Maybe cemented carbide if somebody bought their own. Um, I went to Haas had some kind of event at a school about 3 hours away, and the instructor wanted me to come with him. And it's in a town no bigger than Athens, Tennessee, right? You know, I don't know how big it is. It's not real big. They were, I mean, tooled up better than where I work is. Probably better than our shops are. I mean, they had listed cabinets to the brim with brand new Walter, Seco, Sandvik, Kennametal, you know, all the fancy high end brands. And like 4 or 5 newer Haas machines, 8, 10, 12 programming computers with actual current. I mean, it was amazing. It's so much different. And the only thing I could figure is they either had a better guy there to bargain for funding, or just the proximity to Nashville. I don't know. That's one thing that gets me is the standard of education is just not one. Consistent.
I'd have to say, and this, I guess, just my opinion. I'm sure some people will comment on it. I just think our trade is so big. Our skill set is so wide. I mean, you could have a guy that's just an operator. You could have a programmer, setup guy. You know, you could have a machinist that has never touched a CNC, and they're just a great manual machinist that can do just about anything on a Bridgeport, an engine lathe, grinder. Pat, you made a comment about what was so great about the tool and die apprenticeship. I got my start in a tool and die shop, and that's where I first started. I didn't know what a Bridgeport was, engine lathe, or anything. But in my opinion, I'd say somebody that came out of a mold shop or a tool and die shop, you have a little bit more of a skill set because I would saw cut my own stuff. I'd mill it on Bridgeport, run an engine lathe, grind it, drill press. I had to run every type of equipment to build the die. It was up to me from start to finish to do it. Drill holes, grind, prep for wire. Some shops you'd set up your own wire. A couple of them you'd run a CNC to. I ran flame cutters. I'd weld my own die sets. You know, you had to do everything. It wasn't just your job was to put a part in a CNC and run that one part. You know, we ran cold roll steel, hot roll steel, A2, S7. You had to do everything. You know, so you had to have the skill to understand what you were doing every day with no guidance.
Yeah. Would you say that's more of something that's, I guess something more common in the tool and die world, or just an old school way of doing things? Because I can see, you know, like
probably tool and die, I'd say.
I'm just thinking back before CNC. I mean, you go to a shop that's just got all manual machines. I would imagine a lot of the guys there are kind of just handling their own parts start to finish.
Yeah. It's probably tool and die and mold shops, that type of work. Just kind of what you're doing day to day. I think a lot's changed with the technology. We didn't surface parts either. So if we built a prog die that, you know, had a form and we had to get that radius over an A2 block, it wasn't put in a CNC and surfaced. It was, we would dress a grinding wheel to match that radius, and we'd have to grind it on there. And, you know, sometimes you'd have multiple radiuses on a grinding wheel, or you'd have to grind odd shapes on a core pin. So you'd have to indicate in, it's been so long since I've done it, I don't even know the name of these things, but we'd have like a Spindex with a V block on it, and you'd have to offset it. You indicate it in your offset, so then you grind your radius to your flat or whatever shape you needed to do. Yeah. I mean, you could spend 3 hours on a pin.
Yeah. Wow. That's one thing about, like, I feel like tool and die, especially before CNC was as prominent, would have been a pretty awesome place to start. As far as building skills. Because, like, I mean, all the stuff you're talking about, most people probably don't touch any of that. Nope. I mean, do some sort of just the nature of, you know, dies. Yeah. Like 3D, a lot of 3D stuff like injection molding and stuff like that. I mean, all this different contours and stuff you have to do and figure out how to do manually. Yeah,
it was, you know, and then you'd get on a grinder and, you know, you'd have a mag base or a sign plate, you know, and a compound sign plate, you know, you'd have to compound this way, compound that way, you know, just to get these angles on these blocks. And, you know, I don't think since I've left the tool and die shop, I don't think I've seen anyone use sine vise or sine plate for anything.
Yeah.
And I think I own 4 sine vices that I haven't used in probably 15 years now.
I use a sine bar every once in a while, but
yeah,
that's it. So,
I mean, I used a sine vise probably when I was in tool and die. I probably used one weekly. It was just,
yeah. The last shop I worked at, I would use a sine bar somewhat frequently. There's a lot of like, there was, you know, aerospace parts and stuff like that. And it was pretty much all 3-axis mills. They had a few 5-axis machines, but I mean, that was brand new, so I didn't touch any of that. But now I haven't used one in so long. Like I would definitely have to look up the formula to even calculate my angle.
I ended up, I used to always have to calculate it, but I ended up printing it out one night because I got sick of typing in the calculator trying to figure out it. So I ended up printing out a chart with every degree. So then I just look at it, a little cheat sheet. Okay, that's my gauge block setup. I know what it is.
Nice.
Yeah. Hey, so to kind of steer us back to what we were originally talking about, how'd you actually get into that shop? How'd you actually get into the trade?
So out of high school, I was interested in welding, and I actually signed up to go to tech school for welding. I think I was a couple weeks into it, and I had a family member reach out that knew I was going. They had just laid someone off, and they did a little bit of welding. And he asked if I was interested in coming in, so I did. I didn't know at the time it was a machine shop, but I think I went in on a Thursday for an interview, talked to the owner I was there probably for 3 hours. So he walked me through, and he's like, what do you think? I'm like, works for me. He said, we'll come back Monday if you want to start at 6 o'clock. And I was like, all right, cool. I remember I thought it was a part-time gig, and I was there till that first day till 4:30. And I went in the office and I said, hey, do you want me to come back tomorrow? He's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, well, what are my hours? He's like, well, you're here Monday through Friday, 6 to 4:30 every day. I'm like, thought it was part-time.
Oh, wow.
So, and I mean, that first day, and I mean, he paid well. So I'm sitting there I'm just like, okay, cool. Oh man, I'm rich. This is awesome.
Right.
I mean, I was 18 years old. But I had never seen a Bridgeport, a lathe, anything. So I swept the floor. I think the first week I was there, I walked around the Bridgeport sweeping as people were making chips. I just swept all day, every day. I think I cleaned the bathrooms. And after a couple weeks, my uncle that got me the job, he had me start saw cutting stuff. He said, he showed me the shelf. This is all the material. They had prints, full-size prints. Everything was printed to scale. And then, your bill of materials. So I had to cut everything. So I did that for about a month. I just cut everything up for the jobs. And then it was like, hey, I'm going to teach you how to square up a block on a Bridgeport. And I remember turning that handle the first time and them chips spraying at me. It was kind of lost interest for a second there, but then I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. It's, I took a block, made it square, put some holes in it. This is pretty cool. And then, I made my way from there. And, back to one of the last episodes we talked about SFM. I mean, I never, to this day, I don't calculate it. I don't even know how. I've never used it. I was taught to listen to the cutter and feel the machine. And then you adjust. I don't even think our Bridgeports they were so worn out, they didn't even have this RPMs on them. So you just turn it out. You just crank it to what you thought. That
sounds
right.
Like 1400.
You turn that handle and you could feel how it was cutting, how the table was pulling. The machine was shaking too much. So you made your adjustments off of that. I think I was probably 3 months into it, and I was like, I think I'm going to stick with machining. So I never went back to school. I never went back to welding class. Yeah. And from that point on, I think my uncle kind of stuck it in my head. Your goal needs to be to start your own shop at some point. He said, you come in, you learn as much as you can. And he stuck it in my head that if the shop allowed me to buy tools and take it out of my check weekly, he said, buy everything you can. You just have everything in your toolbox. So I had gauge block sets, gauge pins, sine vices. I mean, I could build a die without ever leaving my toolbox.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, I guess you listened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It stuck in my head. It was just, at some point, I'm going on my own.
Yeah. You think he could just tell you had it in you?
Yeah.
I feel like you can tell at a pretty early age if somebody's got whatever it is,
Yeah.
that figure out ability, whatever that term would be.
Yeah. I think a lot of it's just drive, interest. It was just for me, I don't know. I enjoyed seeing the finished product. I enjoyed, seeing raw stock turn into something. And then it was also cool. I mean, you built the die and you would see what the die was for. So, I mean, I built dies for Snap-on, random Nordic ware, bake plates, just random stuff. But then you'd see it 6 months later in the store and it's like, oh, that's
yeah.
I built that die.
That's pretty
That's cool, man. Yeah.
We did a lot of prog dies for Polaris, Articat, just random brackets. The prog dies were cool because you'd build it and then you'd have to run the first set to the punch. You'd set it up in the punch press and you'd run it and you'd see the progression of the sheet metal part form itself and then cut it off and you'd have a finished part. It was pretty cool to see.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. So
that's neat, man.
Seems like a lot of people though just kind of get a random start into machining somehow.
Yeah.
Seems like the vast majority of people do.
I'd say it's probably random. You got to sign up for something so they pick it, or, you got family in it.
Yep.
That you follow.
Yeah. Well, I mean, considering considering how many people don't even know what machining is.
Right.
It's probably, I guess that increases the likelihood of it being random.
Yep.
I know it was random for me. Well, somewhat random. I guess I did make a decision that I wanted to be a machinist before I actually started machining.
Because you haven't been machining too long, have you?
No, 4.5 years now. So I started February 2020.
Oh,
so just about 4.5 years. No, so I actually had somewhat of a career before I started machining. I worked on aircraft. I did avionics, so like the electrical side of aircraft. But I just kind of got tired of it, and I also was living in North Carolina at the time. I'm from Georgia. Was living up there. My wife also was from Georgia, and we were just kind of tired of living at the place, tired of working where I was, ready to move back to Georgia, get a little bit closer to family, but not too close. So we kind of just picked an area that we liked, and so she's in the medical field, so we knew no matter what, she'd have a job. So we used her to basically be able to buy a house and have a place to live, I guess, where we wanted to. So anyways, picked a place, moved there. That was December of 2019. I didn't have a job for 2 months, or actually, no, it was longer than that because I quit the place I was at in, I want to say, late October, early November. So I don't think I had a job for 3 or 4 months. But we lived with her parents for a while we were looking for a place to live, and then finally found a place, moved here. Didn't know what I was going to do. I hadn't decided yet if I was going to do machining. Had applied to some smaller aviation maintenance companies. Never heard anything back. Didn't want to work at the Atlanta airport because that sounds terrible. It's also driving down there, not having Atlanta traffic every day. It'd be like an hour drive to work every day. And then if if somebody stands on the side of the highway down there, traffic comes to a stop. So really the way I got into it was partially out of necessity. I needed a job. I needed something to do, and it kind of fell in my lap. And also out of interest, I actually wanted to do it. The way
Did you consider going to school?
I don't think I actually consider. Well, actually, I might have looked up some machining schools, but we don't have anything around us. The closest thing was like an hour and a half away, and it was like a dumpy little. I mean, they didn't have much at all. Like, I don't think it really would have been worth going to. And then there's another place that I think was an hour south of me as well, which seemed like it was a little bit better, but wasn't really feeling it. So I also needed a job right away. So there was that too. So anyways, to get around to my point, the way that I actually got my foot into the door at a shop was, we're in this new town that we just moved to. It's New Year's Eve. We went to Main Street. It's a small town. So we went to Main Street. They had Main Street shut down, doing their own little ball drop and stuff. And we're standing, me and my wife are standing by the bar, and we just happened to strike up a conversation with some people. and as a group of people that all gone out, on town, out on the town with each other, and kind of make friends with them. And one of the guys asked me what I do, and I was like, well, used to work on aircraft, kind of got tired of it. I don't really know what I'm going to do, but I'm looking for a job. I've seen some like machining videos on YouTube. That seemed pretty cool. I think I might, want to try out machining. I might want to get into that. And then he's like, oh, I actually know 2 machinists. You want me to talk to him for you? And it's just like a random dude that I'd met that night. And I was like, sure, here's my number. So I gave him my number, and then he talked to both of those guys for me. One guy wasn't really looking to hire anybody, but the other guy was like, yeah, tell him to come down to the shop Monday and, check it out. So that Monday I went down to the shop. It was actually 10 minutes from my house. Showed up there. I guess the owner and the plant manager or shop manager walked me around the place, showed me what was going on. I didn't know what a CNC machine was. I'd only ever seen manual machining videos. So that's what I was expecting to get into. But walked me around the place, blew my mind when I saw the CNC machines, because I was, living at 10 miles an hour. They're over here at 100. Asked me what I thought. I was like, man, this is awesome. Looks cool to me. I'd love to try it out. And he's like, all right, cool. When do you want to start? And I was like, I'll start tomorrow. So I literally started up right there. No skills, no experience whatsoever. I got lucky. I was able to skip the sweeping the floor intro. Mm-hmm. Got straight into machining. I showed it my first day, and they just had me start deburring some parts. Something simple. And I was actually pretty surprised by how surprised they were that I was able to deburr parts without screwing it up. And you're talking about just taking like a ring around tool and like hitting a couple edges on a part and hitting it they were aluminum parts, hit it with some Scotch-Brite to break an edge, that sort of thing.
A what? A ring around what?
I call it a ring around tool. I don't know what you
ring around tool?
Yeah.
It's a whirly-bird.
Yeah, there you go. Everybody's got a different name for that thing.
I know.
But yeah, so anyways, got started working there, like, I don't know, my second day. They had me running a machine, and I didn't start with any manual machining. Like a lot of places, they have you start out with the manual stuff and then work your way up to CNC machines. They literally just threw me on a machine. They're like, all right, this job's already set up. Here's how you swap parts. Whenever it's time to set up the next operation, ask one of these guys and they'll show you what to do. I was like, all right, cool, I guess. Like, not really any kind of guidance on like, hey, when you're loading a part into a vise, you want to make sure there's no chips underneath it. Like, you want to make sure it's sitting flat. You want to make sure it's up against your stop. None of that. I just kind of like winged it and did what seemed right, and it somewhat worked out. I did screw up a lot of stuff though. But yeah, that was I just got thrown into the fire, and there's ups and downs to it. The upside is you learn fast, you screw up a lot of stuff, and then you got to try to figure out how to fix it before somebody finds out because you feel like an idiot for screwing it up. So you learn a lot from doing that. The downside to it is they didn't have anybody there to actually teach you anything. There's nobody's job to teach you. So you're just working with a bunch of other random machinists, and whenever you need to learn something like how to touch off tools, or how to adjust a wear offset, or even load a program, it's like every 5 minutes you feel like you got to ask somebody a question. So then you got to stop this guy from doing what he's doing in order to, show you something very basic on a machine for everybody else, but mind-blowing for you. And then they did teach me some inspection stuff. I kind of it was literally all just on the job, like no formal education whatsoever. It was like, as you approach a problem or as you run into a problem, ask somebody if they can show you what to do. So there was some stuff where I would just try to figure it out on my own. After like 20, 30 minutes of figuring it out, or trying to figure it out and not figuring it out, then I would ask a question. There was a lot of that. Sometimes I would just ask if I knew it was too complex, but it was pretty much, you just learn what you need to learn when you need to learn it, not here's a bunch of information that's going to be useful in the future. Let's build your skills kind of thing. So that way whenever you actually show up to a problem, you've at least seen it before or got some sort of background on it, or, done it, whatever. but yeah, so I worked at that place for 4 months. They ended up putting me on night shift for a little while, which was cool. I liked it. What I didn't like about it was the place was super disorganized, and it was extremely like, I was actually talking to somebody about this today. So we used, Brad, your video with the power ratchet. Yeah. So that was something I started doing at the shop that I'm at now, which oddly enough was the guy who wasn't hiring, that the other guy, random guy that I met at New Year's, was that. So he ended up losing 2 employees, then hit me up like 4 months after. And that's how I ended up here where I'm at now. So that first shop that I was working at, like, it was difficult to even find an Allen wrench to swap your jaws out. That's how bad it was.
Mm-hmm.
No ratchets in sight. So all Allen wrench, if you could find one, you might have to go steal one from somebody else to use it and then bring it back to them. And then like the only thing I remember actually being organized and where you need it, when you need it, was taps. Other than that, it seemed like you had to search forever for everything. Like to find a 1/4-inch aluminum end mill, I could spend 30 minutes just trying to find that one tool. And then like they recut soft jaws for everything. So every time you run a job, you cut new soft jaws. They didn't even stock soft jaws. So you would just search around the shop, be like, this set of soft jaws looks like it has enough meat in it for machining. I don't know the shape of the part that I'm about to machine, but I also don't know how much room I need between the jaws. And I don't know what is even getting machined into the jaws. So let's see what happens. Then you load your jaws in there, figure out it's not going to work, go find another set, make the spacing a little bit further apart because you've learned on the last one that they weren't far enough apart. And so that whole, I'm sure you can imagine how all that went. So got sick of that, which didn't take long. Just kind of poorly managed. Like even, they used a 2-inch Iscar shoulder mill for roughing out aluminum all the time. And I don't know how many employees they had. I want to say I could probably count like 20 on day shift there. There was 1 pack of inserts for it. And it was like, during the 4 months that I was there, I think I saw 1 pack. And I'm pretty sure I went through all the inserts because I shattered them once. There was like 3 inserts left. I grabbed the last 3 and that was it. And then I talked to a guy like, hey, I don't know where any more inserts are for this, but I just had to use the last 3. He's like, well, I guess I'll order some. I'm like, how do you not have more inserts on? Like, you should have more than enough and it is a common tool they use in a lot of machines. Like, you should have more than enough inserts on hand for this freaking tool that you use in all these machines. That, I don't know, it just didn't make any sense to me. So I got sick of it.
One of the early shops I worked at, I had my own shell mill and I bought all my own inserts because they wouldn't buy them. So I'd order a case and have them take it out of my check.
Man, I was about to, like, I was almost to that point at this place. Granted, I wasn't going to do that, at least not at that point. I'm 4 months into machining, 3 months into machining, or whatever. But it's like, as things progressed, I probably would have ended up buying my own stuff like that. Just because I get so sick of looking for it all.
And that was kind of why I did it too. I found a better shell mill that just cut better. I could take a deeper cut, and I think I went through the inserts they had, and he didn't want to buy them, so I'm like, I'll buy them. Like, I make my job easier. Yeah, well, and if you're the one controlling that stuff, was that when you were manual machining? Yep.
Yeah, so definitely, if you can find something to make your life easier like that, do it. For me, it would have just been out of making my life easier to find a tool, period. Yep. But yeah, so anyways, I got sick of that place. I was kind of like trying to figure out what I was going to do next, looking at machine shops in the area, seeing if anybody would even take me with only 4 months of experience. And then, that original guy who didn't need anybody texted me out of the blue one day and was like, hey, are you still looking for a job? I was like, matter of fact, I am. And so it didn't take long. I was up at his shop, started working there, and I haven't left since. And it's a pretty small shop. So when I started working there, it was me, his brother, and him. And that was it. He had 2 other employees, but one of them quit. One of them had some family stuff going on or something. So then it was just us. and just kind of been winging it ever since. But
Nice.
the nice part about that place is I've been able to pretty much grow as much as I want to. There hasn't been really any limitation put on me. So like I went from having 4 months of experience, not knowing anything, to talking him into buying me a seat of Fusion so I can teach myself how to program, learn how to program, then started programming for the shop, little by little. And now I'm, the lead programmer, or at least lead mill programmer. He still does a lot of lathe programming, but pretty much all the mill stuff is done by me. And I've pretty much changed everything about that place. Like changed the layout of the shop, changed how we organize things. And when I showed up there, the organization wasn't great at all either, but I saw the potential for improvement. He seemed like the kind of guy that would be down for improving the place. Seemed like a small enough place to where, like, when you're working with the owner every day, you can talk him into stuff. And so that it's changed drastically since I started. But mostly because he's willing to actually invest in the company and make life easier for everybody. So we do things like we have a power ratchet at every single mill for changing out soft jaws. There's a power ratchet at every mill. You already got your Allen bit on there. It's ready to roll. So when you want to change out your soft jaws, you just open your vise up a little bit, pop them out, pop your next ones in. You're ready to roll.
It's nice, especially if you got the stubby.
Yeah, it's a matter of well, we usually we use 2x2 aluminum soft jaws. So we need the longer bit, 15 seconds, 20 seconds to swap out jaws.
Mm-hmm.
If you're fast, maybe 45 seconds if you're slow or something.
Yep.
Which is a drastic change from spending 5 or 6 minutes walking around the shop trying to find an Allen wrench.
I was going to say on that, when you said you worked at an organized shop, the first shop I worked at, it was a tool and die shop, so everybody wore a jean apron. That was just standard. I don't know. You almost felt like it was required because everybody had one on. But we had to have a 3/8, 5/16, and 1/4 inch wrench in your pocket, a 6-inch scale, a scribe, and 2 markers. And the owner, if he came out and he grabbed one and it wasn't in there, he'd make you go find one. Yeah, he hated it. There were 3 common tools he used every day, so you kept them on you no matter what. Yeah, did he not like the potential for wasted time trying to find something you should have just already have? Yeah. Yep. There were plenty of times you'd be building a die and he'd come out and help and he'd ask for a wrench because he wasn't in the shop every day. But if you didn't have it on, he'd look at you and he'd say, "What the fuck? You're supposed to have this in your pocket."
Yeah.
And, he caught me a couple times and I'd have to walk across the shop to my toolbox and he'd sit there and he'd put his hand on his hip and he'd tap his foot and just stare at you the whole time. And like, oh, fuck. Here we go. He's pissed.
Yep. Make it hurt a little bit. Yep. I kind of get the same way with people not putting things back where they go.
Yeah.
Now, like, if there's not an obvious place and they didn't really know any better, whatever. That's one thing. Like, hey, when you use this thing, I know it's not obvious, but can keep it back or keep it in this location. But whenever it's obvious that something, like where something is supposed to go, it's like, get your shit and put it back where it goes. Other people need to use this stuff.
Yep. Yeah. There's just some stuff that should stay at the machine. You have at every machine. I do it myself in a shop by myself. I don't run my VF2 very often, so I might bring a tool over there and use it, and I'll leave it there. And then I walked around for 10 minutes looking for something. I'm like, I left it over there. If
I'm ever walking around for 10 minutes looking for something, then I try to find a way for that to never happen again.
Yep.
I absolutely despise looking for anything. I just want to know, and I think part of it is coming from aviation. It's like everything is so extremely organized there because, you leave a socket somewhere it's not supposed to be. That could cause an aircraft to crash. So every single tool has to be accounted for all the time, which means they need to be organized in a way where it's easy to make sure you don't, like, a tool is missing, or easy to tell if a tool is missing, or you can make sure every single thing is there. So, like, even a socket, for example, it's going to be in a toolbox, and the spot in that toolbox is going to have a number on it, and then the panel that spot is on will have a letter, and then the toolbox has a number. And then so whenever you find that socket, it's even engraved on the socket. You're like, there's a code for the unit. So it says what unit, what shop, what toolbox, what panel in that toolbox, and what spot on that panel it goes in. So when you come from a place where everything is like that, and you can pretty much blindfolded grab a tool out of a toolbox and you just know where it is all the time, and then, like, walk into a machine shop, like probably most machine shops where they're just disorganized and a cluster. I mean, it's culture shock almost. It's rough, but I also know how good it can be if you actually organize things properly.
Yeah.
You know, it's so much faster, so much easier. It's less, even just the nuisance. I don't know, the annoyance of trying to find something that you should know where to, like, just saving that alone makes your day a whole lot better.
I'm sure everybody's been there.
Yeah, everybody.
Every machine has been there.
Yeah.
I would say organizing is probably going to be a good thing to talk about one day, because all three of us are kind of that same, like, we want our shop to be orderly, right? And not have to hunt for crap. And kind of like you, Cam, I mean, I've transformed a pretty messy, disorganized shop into something that's better. It's not what I want it to be, but it's certainly a lot better.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that can probably be learned there.
I really like organization. The problem is having the time to do it.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
There's some times where I'm like, man, I really should probably be running parts, but this has been bugging me for months. I'm just going to do it because otherwise it's never going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's worth it, you know. Makes life easier for everybody. That's another where, like, 3D printing comes into play.
Oh yeah,
just making life easy.
For sure.
Just a quick random example of this isn't necessarily organizing, but this is like just a quality of life improvement. So we got a computer on the shop floor now, which we didn't used to have. We got a computer out there. I've got like an entire tool library built for the majority of our tools, and so like, you can get on there and look at your tool library. I've got I guess you could call it an ERP system. There's a website called Monday.com. I think it's more for like computer jobs or something where like you track projects and stuff, but I just kind of figured out ways to make it work for the machine shop because it's super cheap. So that's on there. Anyways, we've got one machine where the USB card reader doesn't work. And so you have to use a PC card. So you have to take a program off of a USB card, swap it over to the PC card, then you can put it in the computer, in the machine, and actually, run your program. So normally what would happen is somebody would have to come into the programming room. They're like, hey, can you swap the program over from this card to this card? And like you do the whole thing. Now what can happen is while they're out there on the shop floor, just walk right up to that computer. I guess I have to tell you what I 3D printed. I 3D printed basically a clamp that has a PC card reader and a USB jack together. So you can just plug both of your cards in, and then, it pops up, your file explorer pops up. You can click and drag it over, and then you pull them both out and go on about your way. But that's something where it would have been a real pain to actually make that work without being able to just 3D print a bracket real quick. And I spent like 15 minutes designing this thing, sent it over to the printer, hit print, and then it was done in like 4 hours or something. And so, I don't know. I would say probably the best tool for organization would be a 3D printer.
Yeah.
Or a label maker.
Yeah,
that's probably pretty good too.
Yeah, it's something that you can once you have an idea, you can just let it run, make the thing, and you can be doing something else instead of having to stop and just make a thing.
I don't want to learn about 3D printing, but I love using it.
Well, all right then. That's episode 3 in the bag. Now you all have a little bit of an understanding of how the three of us got into this trade, and it's pretty clear that just like when it comes to making a part, there's no one way to get into machining. So if you're interested in joining the trade, then look into a machine shop near you, or see if there's a machining course nearby that you can get interested in. And if anything else, there's always the Practical Machinist YouTube channel.
If you're near LJ, Georgia, and you're smart, we might hire you. hit me up.
Nice plug.
Machining is cool on Instagram. Yep. We're looking.
I am not.
Nice.
I am not hiring.
Hey, even if you're a machinist, I mean, we're not necessarily looking for somebody new, but we need more machinists.
Mhm. So, audience, thank you for listening. Thank you for staying with us. If you don't mind, give us your feedback. Give us comments. Give us whatever ratings you can. Give us likes. And check us out on Instagram and on the Practical Machinist Forum.
If anyone listening's got more info on the union side or, the machinist 1, 2, 3 journeyman, if you've been through it, if you're older than me, Pat, hop on there and share. I'm actually curious as to how it worked.
Yeah.
Or if there's any shops out there that still follow it,
Yeah.
Mhm.
what the process is.
Good point.
Yeah. I'm actually curious about, I guess I want to see like a rubric or something for the apprenticeship. Really just get information because it's already figured out by somebody,
Yep.
here's all the different skills we want you to learn. I want to get that for our shop for training new guys. I'm not trying to necessarily start an apprenticeship, but having that info would be good. So maybe if somebody's got that
out there
info
that has it
and wants to share it, that'd be great.
Absolutely. Yeah. Good idea, boys.
Yep.
All right,
and if you have any good ideas for or any topics for future videos, I don't know if you already said that, but throw that on there too.
I did not.
We're always
Or if
looking for ideas.
or if there's a machinist out there that's still in a union, maybe have a guest on and share.
Let us know what it's like.
We're curious. And, we don't need to get into the politics of it because that's not what it's about for us. It's just, some of us are in a union and a lot of us aren't. So we're just curious. We'd be interested in ourselves learning about what it's like and, what the pros and cons are on both sides of it. So we'd be more than happy to look into that. All right. Thank you all for listening, and we'll catch you next time.